Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric here with Switch Adapted Toys, and today's video is going to be a little bit different. I don't have a toy to show you how to adapt today. We will have more of those soon. Quite honestly, we're very busy just trying to get all of our Etsy orders out before Christmas. There's still some time, so if you want to pick up a Switch Adapted toy adapted by us, you got a couple more days to get them out before we kind of run into a deadline of shipping for Christmas. But this video came about because of a comment that I saw basically asking us to show people what kind of tools and equipment that we use to adapt toys. So that's what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna kind of go over everything that we use. We're not sponsored by anybody, so these are all just products that we've purchased ourselves and that we use. We'll put a link in the description to everything, but we're not sponsored or not trying to push anything on anybody. So this is just what we use personally. So yeah. But before we get into that, if you're new to Switch Adapted Toys, or if you just stumbled across this video, Switch Adapted Toys is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to make play possible for kiddos of all abilities. We do that by showing people how to take toys off the shelf and essentially rewire them so that they're more accessible and more inclusive for children with disabilities. We've got a ton of information on our website, and I'll probably point you there a bunch during this video. That's www.switchtoys.org, and if you want to find out more about our organization, you can check that out. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is our headphone jacks. This is kind of the most important part in adapting a toy. Basically what we do, if you've never adapted a toy before, is we essentially bypass one of the buttons on the toys using one of these cords. And it's basically just a standard mono headphone jack. You can use stereo headphone jacks, but monos are just so much easier. They're about the same price, so I really recommend that you go and find some mono. I'll put a link to the ones that we use. You can know it's mono because it's only got 2 wires coming out of it. Your wire colors might be completely different, but 2 wires is what you're looking for. They're also called TS connectors, mono headphone jacks. You know, that should get you pretty close if you look on Amazon. But you will need a bunch of these. You'll need one for every toy that you want to adapt and for every button on that toy. So some toys just have a single button, some toys have like 5 of these. So they generally come in like a pack of 10, or we buy them in bulk. So we buy them hundreds at a time because we go through a lot of them. Mono headphone jacks, or you can use stereo, but definitely use mono. All right, so next we're going to talk about soldering irons. They come in a bunch of different varieties. We really like battery-powered ones because we teach people how to do this. We're kind of mobile in that capacity, so having power is not always convenient. So these are just like, this is just a pretty inexpensive battery-powered one. It takes AA batteries. It takes a little second to heat up, but really any soldering iron will work. My favorite is this Milwaukee one, just because it's got a rechargeable battery, and I'm kind of, I guess you'd say a Milwaukee fanboy. But it's got a nice light on it. This is way overkill. You could do with a really cheap soldering iron to do this. The cheapest ones are probably the corded ones. I'll put a link to in the description below. But this is the one that I use personally. This is the one that we use for all of our events. And the corded one is also good. All right, so the next thing you're gonna need is some solder. This is the solder that we use. They do come in a bunch of different thicknesses or gauges. I find the thinner, the better. The smaller the solder wire, the better. Basically what it is just metal that conducts electricity well, and it melts really easily. So this will basically make the connection between our headphone jack wires and whatever we're adapting inside the toy. So you'll definitely need some solder. And like I said, try to find the thinnest you can. So if you do this a bunch, you might want to consider picking up a fume extractor. Soldering will kind of produce some fumes. You're not really supposed to breathe that stuff in. It's kind of nasty. So what this is basically a fan that just draws all that in, and there's a filter here which filters it all out. So if you're doing this a bunch, you might want to consider picking one of these up. I just got one recently, and I really enjoy not smelling and inhaling those fumes, which you definitely shouldn't do. And you're also going to want to pick up a flux pen. What this is it basically helps prevent a circuit board from burning up when you're soldering to it. All you do is just kind of dab the circuit board, and it kind of also helps clean it a little bit. So if you're soldering to circuit boards, you definitely want to use some flux and just pick up a pen like this. It'll last you a long time, and they're pretty cheap. All right, so the next piece of soldering gear I would pick up is an extractor. This is super handy when you make a mistake and you've got solder kind of everywhere on the circuit board. Sometimes those little points we're soldering to are very small, and you can kind of get solder that kind of goes from one point to another and can cause some problems. So if you get into a bind, you can kind of basically just suck up that solder. What you do is basically heat up that solder until it's kind of, you know, molten, liquidy, and then you come in with this and then hit the button and it kind of sucks it up. So really handy to have, especially if you're going to be soldering to circuit boards. Another soldering thing that's really handy to have is some helping hands, or sometimes they're called alligator clips. This is one that I actually 3D printed. You can find them online if you want, but they just kind of help hold wires in place and hold circuit boards in place so that you've got an extra pair of hands when you're soldering and stuff like that. So super handy. You don't have to 3D print your own. You can buy them, but get some helping hands or alligator clips, something like that. Another option besides the helping hands that I showed is I use this more times than I can count. It's just a block of wood that we screwed in some clothespins to. It does essentially the same thing as those alligator clips or the thing that I 3D printed. And you could probably make this with what you have at home. So this is also another option. You can tell it's been beat to heck. We use it a lot, and can't go wrong with a block of wood, I guess. All right, so let's talk about some hand tools here. The first thing you're going to definitely need is a set of screwdrivers. You probably want a normal size screwdriver and a precision screwdriver. You'll definitely want Phillips head, but you might also want a flathead as well. Some of those screw heads are really small, so try to find a good precision screwdriver. If you do this a lot, you'll probably run into some toys that have I forget what these are called. They're basically triangle tipped screwdrivers. You can get a pack for pretty cheap, and they come in a bunch of different sizes. Some of the toys will have these screws. They're basically like security screws so that people don't really get into them, but you will need this to open some toys, so it's good to have. Specifically like the DJ Bounce and Beats, you'll need this specific screwdriver, so you'll want to pick one of those up. All right, so the next thing we need to talk about is wire strippers. Now, the wires that we use in toys a lot are often very small. They're about 22 gauge, 26 gauge, kind of depends a little bit, but they're pretty small. If you just get like normal, like electrical wire strippers, sometimes they won't get small enough. Like this pair. Now I can still use these to strip like the outside casings on like headphone jacks and stuff like that, so I like to keep them around. But if I'm trying to strip the really small wires, this won't cut it. What you want is something that gets down to about 22 gauge. I really don't have any problem stripping wires 22, 26 with these. So just make sure that they get small enough to strip those small wires. What I really wish I could recommend are these wire strippers here. I use them a lot, but what they tend to do is they just kind of tend to cut the wire entirely. They do make some really expensive ones of these that you can use on those small wires, but if I'm using small wires, I generally will use these wire strippers. These are just kind of automatic. It just makes it really easy. It just kind of pulls the casing off for you. You don't have to think about it or do anything, but sometimes it'll just cut right through the wires. So if you got one of these, that's a really nice high quality one. They should work, but honestly, your best bet is to just get a cheap pair of really small gauged wire strippers. All right, so the next thing you're probably gonna wanna pick up is a pair of snips. And I use these constantly. They are super handy to have. I use them to cut wires. I use them to cut a little bit of plastic. Super handy, super versatile. You'll definitely wanna pick up a pair of snips. So the next thing you might want is a deburring tool. Whenever I cut plastic, I try to take the edge off. Sometimes when you use snips, it'll leave like a really sharp edge. And I just sometimes worry that that's gonna cut into some of my wires. So what I do after I snip some plastic is I just kind of take that edge off with this deburring tool. It's not necessary, but you're really glad you have it when you need it. All right, let's talk about drills for a second. You don't need 2 drills, you could just use 1. You will need a drill that can drill holes through the toy. It really doesn't matter what the size is, as long as it's the same size as your headphone jack. You don't want it too big, you don't want it too loose. But you definitely will need a drill bit to drill holes in the sides of toys to get our headphone jack wires in there. So for that, I just use like a normal power drill. And when I'm unscrewing or screwing in screws, I don't really like to use a big honking drill for that. So I use something like this, and I turn it way down. If you've never used a drill like this before, there should be numbers on the side, and you can change basically the resistance that the drill gives when it's finally tightened. So this will drill down to a point, and then it won't over tighten it, which is really helpful. So you could use something like this. You just want to turn it all the way down. I like to use something a little bit smaller, so that way I don't crack a circuit board or strip out some plastic or anything like that, or even strip out screws. The screws can be really cheap and really easy to strip out, so I just find that this is better if I'm not doing it by hand with like a hand screwdriver. Okay, so another thing that we'll need if we're soldering to wires to wires is some heat shrink wire cover. You can also use some electrical tape, but I really recommend heat shrink wire cover. This stuff's a little bit bigger than we usually use. I just can't find the other stuff right now. I think I'm out. But basically what this does is you cut this to length and you slip it over the wires, and then you can use a heat gun and it will basically shrink down and protect those connections so they don't accidentally touch something else inside the toy and short something out. You could also wrap it with electrical tape, but get some heat shrink wire covers. They make like a pack that's just a bunch of different sizes. Those are really great to have, but you probably will want to try to find the smallest possible gauge if you're using those really small wires inside the toy. And then you'll need a heat gun to heat those up. I use a big battery powered one. It's definitely overkill. You can just go with a cheap heat gun. You might be able to get away with a hair dryer, but really I think you need a little bit more heat than that. So pick up a cheap heat gun. Another really good thing to have is a hot glue gun. You can see ours is pretty well worn. There's just times where you need to make sure wires stay put, don't come dislodged, and a hot glue gun is really great for that. You don't need anything fancy, just a cheap hot glue gun will do just fine. So once you've got your wires soldered and hooked up, you want to make sure that they stay put and a child doesn't like yank them out of the toy whenever they go to and accidentally pull on the headphone jack wire. So what we do is we use zip ties for that, and we put this around the wire on the inside of the toy, and that will basically act like a barrier so that the child can't pull the whole thing out. And for a little extra security, I use some CA glue or super glue. And that basically just helps. I just kind of put it around the zip tie just to make sure it doesn't slide and make sure everything gets locked into place. And then this is some activator, which is really handy to use. This is Type Bond CA Instant Bond Accelerator. You don't need to use this brand. There's other brands out there, but what it does is basically just instantly dries the super glue, so you don't have to wait on anything. I mean, this stuff dries pretty quick anyways, but just a little shot of this will dry it up, and I can just keep working. All right, so once you've got your toy adapted, you're gonna make sure that it works. So you're gonna need a switch button. You're also gonna need a button just to play with the toy. So if you have one, great. If you need one, we've got 3 files for you to 3D print your own. This is one of the ones that we printed. This is actually a glow-in-the-dark top. We've got a bunch of different tops. We sell these on our Etsy shop. So if you don't have a button, you can pick one up there. And I'm telling you, it's a fraction of the cost of what you'd get from like the button manufacturers that are out there. And honestly, it's just as good. We print them using the Bamboo Labs X1C carbons. You don't need a printer that fancy to print these. We just print a ton of them. I really do recommend Bamboo Labs printers. They are really convenient and easy to use. And I've maybe had less than 5 failed prints, and I've printed hundreds of these. So they are really great, and we're not sponsored by them. They don't give us any money. Bamboo Labs, if you want to give us a printer, we will put them to work making switches for kids with disabilities. But this is just what we purchased with our own money. You don't need a Bamboo Lab Carbon either. You could get a A1 Mini, which is the small one, if you're just printing small buttons like this. We do have a larger button. We call it our Mega Switch. It's about 6 inches wide. It's pretty much the biggest button that's out there. You probably can't print it on the A1 Mini, but you could probably, I don't know for sure, but you probably could print it on the A1 or the P1P or the P1S. There's a bunch of different printers. All of them are fantastic from Bamboo Labs. I really would recommend it. All of our files, I mean, that's what we use, so they're all kind of tailored to that. You could definitely print it with another printer. You might have to kind of play around with it a little bit to get your settings dialed in just right, but if you're in the market for a printer, again, not sponsored, but Bamboo Labs is fantastic. That's what I would get. Our 3D printed switch buttons, if you're going to print your own, you could print them for about $5 to $7. You will need some PLA. This is actually glow in the dark, so filament, but you can get whatever color you want. And then the button is activated using a mechanical keyboard switch. So this is a Cherry MX Speed Silver. It's great because it activates with just a tiny bit of force and just a tiny bit of travel. So even like light presses or off-center presses will activate the toy. So if you're going to print your own, you're going to want that. I'll put a link in the description. And you also need a mono headphone jack cable. This is different than the ones that we put inside the toy. This is the male version, and you can get different lengths. So this is a 3-foot long one. You could get 6-foot long, 12-foot long, however long you want. But yeah, that's our 3D printed buttons in a nutshell. What's really nice about them is that you can take the top off and change the color. You could print a name or an image on here, and we've got a bunch of those on our website. So it's kind of, you can customize your button to however you want to use it. We also have 3D printed kits. So we'll print everything for you and kind of put all the parts together if you want to assemble them yourself. You can save some money that way, and it's a great like classroom project. So, you know, if you got a STEM class, if you're teaching about circuitry or soldering or electrical components or anything like that, you can get these for really cheap. We'll print them. Everything will be ready for you to assemble, and you can find that on our Etsy shop as well. I'm looking around, and I think that's pretty much it. That's all I can think about. All the tools that we use. You don't need to go out and buy all these all at once. You're definitely going to need a soldering iron. You're definitely going to need some solder. You're definitely going to need a screwdriver and a drill. And the other things you can kind of put together as you go along. So I think that's pretty much it. Kind of looking around, thinking, what else am I using? That's pretty much what I use on a daily basis to adapt toys. You don't need to go out and buy all this all at once. If you're going to adapt a toy, you're definitely going to need a soldering iron. You're going to need some solder. You're going to need a drill, those headphone jack wires, some zip ties, wire strippers. But some of the other stuff you can kind of piece together as you go along. And all these things can be purchased really inexpensively. Amazon's a great resource. We get a lot of stuff from Harbor Freight, which is really cheap. Or you can get really nice stuff, you know, whatever you want. But I hope this video helped. If you've got other suggestions for us to do, leave it in the comments below. We can make more videos like this. We will get some more toy videos up soon. And if you get a group or an organization and you want to kind of adapt toys on a big scale for kids in your community, you could form what we call a switch chapter. And we kind of help walk you through that process. We've been doing it locally here in Columbia, Missouri, about 7 or 8 years. We just had our big toy giveaway. We give away about 300 toys to kids in the mid-Missouri area, all completely free of charge for them and their families. So if that's something that you're interested in bringing to your community, we want to help you do that. So reach out to us. You can find out more information on our website. Well, that's pretty much it. Thanks for checking out this video. Again, Switch Adapted Toys is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to make play possible for kids of all abilities. So if that's something that interests you, I suggest you like and subscribe to this video, share it with anybody that you know, and check out our website. Again, it's www.switchtoys.org, and I'll put a link in the description for everything that we talked about here today down below, so check that out.